Hi everyone and welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris. Today we're joined by a guy that's been called a massive talent and an exciting prospect by the likes of John O'Callaghan and Paul Van Dyke. He's here to talk about all things production and indeed his forthcoming album. Please welcome to Sonic Academy, Sneijder. Sneijder, are you there?
Yeah, here on. Good.
How are you today?
Yeah, really good.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on Sonic today. We have met a few times. We sort of live relatively close to each other in Ireland. We've been chatting. I know you've been working on your album and you recently finished it. How was it? How did you find the process of doing the album?
Yeah, I found it really. It was a learning curve for me, number one, but it was a real challenge, but in a good way, because it allowed me to do a lot of different styles of music that I don't normally. Music that I really like as a listener and a clubber, but not necessarily when you're trying to promote yourself as an artist. You have to, because there's so limited release slots, you have to always bang out the sound that you're trying to push and you're known for. So sometimes it's good to like dip into some music that you really like as a listener, and as a clubber when you go out or you're chilling at home in the car or whatever. It's good to make tracks like that and sort of like push myself really outside the box. And I think learning those new techniques will stand good for me in the future for my future productions.
We're listening in the background. We're playing the album as we're doing the interview. So it starts off with a breakbeat track. How did you find working with those new genres?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of like guys like the Plump DJs and stuff like that, although it's not, the Plump DJs would be more energetic breaks, but I've always been a fan of breaks in general. And the track itself, Remember Me, it's a breaks mix, but the track was released earlier on in the year on Trance Trust. It was a full-on like 136, I think, like just trance track. It was just it was actually made for Sid Van Rail's Realism compilation. So I really like the melody of that track, and I think it had a big potential to cross over to breaks because it had that type of riff. So it was simple but really uplifting. So that was the one I picked, and I think it turned out really well. I'm really happy with how it sounds.
Okay, let's go back to the start. And you're a 13-year-old DJ. What got you into the music? What was the first sort of, you went, right, this is what I want to do here? What art, was there a particular artist or anything that you loved?
The whole story about behind me wanting to be a DJ was, I used to walk home from school every day, and there was a guy who lived around the corner from me. He had a garage and he had the door open, and every day I would walk past, he was blasting out hardcore music from this garage. And one day, I was really curious about what was going on. So one day I went over and asked him what this was, and he took me in and showed me the records and the decks and the mixer, and I was just absolutely fascinated. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like hooked from that moment. So I went back to my mum and I told her I wanted to be a DJ, and she nearly kicked me out of the house. So it was like I kept going on and on about wanting to be a DJ and stuff. So she bought me my first set of decks, and after that, I think they were like SoundLab belt drives, terrible they were. They were like, if you could mix on them, you could mix on anything really. So I was more a hardcore DJ at the start for many years, and that's sort of where my name Sneijder comes from, because I would go to Holland like once a month and buy Dutch vinyls and stuff and come back, and I was playing them in Ireland, and nobody else had these records because they were mostly white labels and stuff. And you know yourself, back in the days of the vinyl, it was so hard to get exclusive tunes. If you got them, it was so hard for anybody else to get them unless they actually got an official release. So yeah, it went through the hardcore and progressed into like psy-trancey stuff, but it was more the side trance that I played wasn't like the stuff you would hear now. The genre was very saturated, I think, now. I think the stuff back then, like John 00 Fleming and was pushing, and even the Reactivate CDs, you remember those, and like those compilation albums, it was more the genre was a lot more varied. So I sort of filtered into that and discovered like DJs like Pablo Gregano, stuff like that, who for me was like, I loved the acid sound, I loved the energy in his music. It had a wee bit of hard trance, but it was uplifting at the same time. It just had everything that I really liked,
And did you remember Pablo's association with Belfast Underground and all that beforehand, or was it just you liked his sound and then later discovered that?
You see, at that time I was still DJing hardcore music. I was sort of like, I liked his sound, and it was sort of pulling me towards that direction. So I didn't make the full commitment for trance until really pretty late actually. I think it was when I started hearing the likes of Ferry Costin and stuff around 98, 97, 98 that really I made the full commitment to change like genre. So I basically was buying records and all different styles of stuff that I liked and sort of trying to mix it up, if you know what I mean. That's the hardcore. I think hardcore became it just got a bit cheesy after a while. I mean, the stuff I was playing wasn't like, it wouldn't really been the Scottish sound that was probably the most popular here. It would have been the more, like, you remember Bin Man, that sort of the real industrial, the hard stuff. So that would have been the sort of sound that I would have went for. And then after a while, I just suppose, clubbing and going out with my friends and stuff, things just sort of progressed, your sounds changed, and moved to Belfast, lived there for a while, started going to Shine, started liking some techno stuff as well. I just think it's who you're like hanging around with and the clubs you're going to and who you're involved with. Sort of then you take away from a certain genre what you like from it, and you sort of add it to your overall sound. So I was building up my own sound in my head of what I wanted to be as a producer, but I was never interested in production, until late.
And then what happened? What was the leap to production then? What was the catalyst to get you over to that? Yeah,
I think it was more or less, obviously it was DJing, playing like regular events around Northern Ireland, just like just your normal run-of-the-mill bedroom DJ really, and I just felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere, It's just like the Northern Ireland club seemed very small, as you know, and it's just like it can be pretty difficult to break through because a lot of the clubs I found here was giving slots to their mates or like different things like that, and it was, for me, I said to myself, look, if I'm going to make this happen, I need to think further afield, more on the international scene, and the only way to do that is create my own brand, create my own name. So yeah, I set up a small studio and put my head down, and just like it just snowballed from there really.
And where did you start learning production at that point? Where you sit down you get your computer, you get your piece of software, and you go, right, what did you have YouTube at that time? Did you attend a school, or how did you? What was your first steps?
There was no YouTube or anything. There was basic YouTube stuff and whatever, but it was more trial and error. I mean, it was more just trance stuff. What I used to do was take tracks and try and replicate them. So I would take like my favorite trance tracks or whatever, and I would sit and really dissect them. I would take them section by section, and I would just like spend a month on each section that I try and get it sounded as close as possible. So that's what it was, more like trying to replicate different sounds and different tracks that I really liked, that and trial and error that really led me to find my own sound. That's the way it went for me.
Did you find it difficult at the start, where you were kind of, a lot of guys when they start producing find out, it is a very long process to become a decent producer and give up. Did you find the same, or were you just single-mindedly determined to get it done and become that sort of producer?
Yeah, I think I'm a very driven sort of person. I have a very that sort of personality where if I start something, I won't give up on it. So like when I started producing at the start, I sort of realised pretty early on that it was going to be very difficult. So I wanted it that bad that I was working on a construction site. I quit my job, basically lived on the breadline for like 2 years, had no money whatsoever, and I was working in the studio learning from like 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night every single day. So I went for like basically a year and a half, 2 years with no job, and my wife, Kasha, who was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she supported the two of us, so she believed that she had the same belief in me that I had, so it was basically all or nothing for me really.
It's definitely, anybody I interview, is a common thread that those early years, it is just 110% commitment. I hate that because you can only get 100% commitment, but it is 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, just learning your craft. And I think it's a really important lesson for a lot of people, that you can't just sort of dip in and do it a few hours a night. You have to go for it, and you have to really just go, right, everything else, the social life aside, perhaps love life aside, and just devote your life to producing and learning your craft. When did you start? Who was a big influence on you then? What sort of sounds were you listening to, and what tracks were you dissecting?
As far as when I first got into production, it was the likes of yourselves and Paul Van Dyke, like Nelly Nelson.
Jesus, don't ever try and copy what I did. Never do that. That's a real bad lesson.
I love the bass lines you had and the energy you had in your tracks. It was, that's what I was listening to at the time. That's what drew me into trance. It was your sound and the likes of Ferry Costin, Paul Van Dyke. I don't want to sound cliche here with all the usual ones, but that was the sound at the time in the UK. You know, that was the super club era, and it was really like that. The whole buzz was around. You know, I would have listened to Judge Jules' show every week and stuff, and I was taking down the names of records, and I would have bought those, and just anything that I really liked that had a buzz. I mean, as far as like taking an influence from any artist, I don't think there was any really one in particular. It was just a collection of maybe a few really ones that I really liked, and I think it was trying to copy their sound and then making mistakes and then adding my own wee elements that sort of developed. I could see my own style developing slowly, and then over the years I was producing. Now I have an idea of what I like. Alan Fela was also a big influence on the sound as well. So.
And do you develop a confidence when you're, you know, there's one thing I always struggled with was, is this good, is this not good? And it's something you actually have to, along with learning your software, you have to learn to trust your instinct and your gut feelings, and you kind of tend to, it takes a while to get that. Did you discover that as well?
Yeah, I think when I first started producing, even maybe up until about 3 years ago, my self-esteem as a producer was like very low. I mean, wouldn't say it was very low, but I didn't have confidence in myself, and you know, I was just like always saying, is this good enough? You know, I think a big turning point for me was in the early stage of my productions when I was making music. I was making tracks, okay, they were decent enough tracks, okay, they were okay, and then I was going out and I was playing, but I was never reaching for those tracks first. I was always reaching for other people's tracks. So I was coming home and sitting down saying to myself, you know, if I'm not reaching for these tracks, playing my DJ set, saying, why would anybody else do it? And I think that was a big turning point for me, and it was a harsh lesson that I needed to take a step back and really bring my sound and the quality of my productions up to speed. So I think it took 6 months out, and I worked relentlessly until Vandit signed away from here, and that was a big turning point for me, because I knew that if Vandit had signed that track, and it was, you know, the production quality was obviously there, like, and ever since then I've tried to make my tracks really the best quality I can make them, and quality is a big thing for me now, because I know if the quality's there and the ideas are there and it all comes together. Like, I've heard so many tracks that brilliant ideas, but the quality of production is terrible. They're just unplayable. But the ideas are there, so I think that was a big turning point for me, just sort of to bring the, you know, productions up to speed, really.
And how did you go from being that bedroom producer, sort of locked away for days on end on your own, to getting the track signed? What was your strategy to get your track signed? To say, like, I think it was Vandit was your first label. Infrasonic.
I signed the track to Infrasonic before that, and then Vandit was the next one after. I had a few like smaller things before that, but they weren't even anything really worth talking about. They were terrible tracks, to be honest. But I don't think there was any sort of I didn't sort of hatch any plan. I don't think anybody can predict if their track's going to get signed or not. I think that's down to the A&R of the label. So I think it's just basically putting 100% of effort into the track, spending time on it. Of course, getting some sound advice from people within the industry or the scene who are respected and you know are going to give you honest advice. You know, John O'Callaghan gave me a lot of advice. I sent him some tracks, and he was always really honest with his feedback. Sometimes, you know, it annoyed me sometimes, but I took it on the chin.
Yeah, because he could be brutally honest sometimes, can't he?
Yeah, but it's a good thing. But now that I've progressed on, sometimes I agree with some of the stuff he says, and sometimes he doesn't. But that's just the way it is. I've developed my own sound, you know. But back in the days when I was trying to break through, you know, his advice was definitely invaluable to me, and it was good of him to take the time to listen to the tracks, or whatever. So, yeah, I think advice, good honest advice is definitely a good thing, and also you have to have that confidence in your sound. And I've had a lot of knockbacks when I was sending tracks, and people only see about the tracks that's signed, but they don't see the tracks that aren't signed and the struggle of sending stuff. So I think you have to have that wee bit of belief in your sound as well, is very important.
Talk to us a little bit about this. You know, something that probably a lot of people don't really see is there's so much struggle in the background where you've days on end where just nothing is working, everything sounds shit, and you're just tearing your hair out and going, I'm shit, this is shit. I just, you know, how do you get past that? And does this happen to you often? Because I know it happened to me a lot, you know. I
think from talking to various producers now that I've met a lot of people in the scene, over the last couple of years. I don't think I've met anybody that hasn't went through them stages, like writer's block, if you want to call it, or like just having no inspiration. I think the best thing that I learned to do to sort of solve that was just take regular studio breaks, and don't. I think sometimes if you sit for hours on end over a couple of loops, you can drive yourself nearly mental. I think it's better to like treat your studio days like 9 to 5, and then at 5 o'clock switch everything off. Even if you're on a roll, this is what I found, because at night time you can like that break can be invaluable to you. You can hear something like you might have heard before the next day. I don't think there's anything that can really, you know, inspire you. Sometimes even if you take a break from a tune for a couple of weeks, you go to a couple of gigs, you're playing, you hear other people, DJs playing, they play a few tracks and you go, you know what, I just heard something on that track would suit my track. You know, I could take inspiration from that or different things. That's helped me lots. And in fact, some of my most successful tracks or remixes have came from coming to an absolute standstill with a track, going away DJing, hearing a wee sound, and come back and taking inspiration from it and integrating it into my own. And some of those elements have been the standout elements in the tracks.
Let's chat a little bit about the album now that's playing in the background. We've just heard one of my favourite tracks on it, which is what's it called?
Low Orbit Ion.
Low Orbit Ion. I love that really dark, jacky sound. Is that a sound that you're going to try and pursue a little more, or is that purely an album thing?
Yeah, I would love to. Again, as I said earlier, I love the way and the fact that the album gave me a chance to dip into some inspirational stuff from myself growing up. Like that track in itself comes from like inspiration from my days at Shine, and like it's sort of like a wee bit French Kiss.
Yeah.
You know, inspired a wee bit, and the pads and the break are very eerie, and it's like, you know, it has like. I just dipped into different sounds and took different things that I liked. It has techno influences as well. It just has a wee bit of everything rolled into one. So I would definitely love to make some more stuff like that. It's just finding the time whenever you're pushing your 140 stuff. And I spend so long on tracks. Like, you know, I would spend a month on a track easy, just fine tuning it and, you know, just being real nitty over it. Like
that's something I talk to a lot of guys nowadays, and I feel really sort of inferior because they spend, you know, 3 days on a track and it's done, and I'm going, Christ, it takes me like it used to take me 4 weeks to really get a track, to fine tune it and stuff. I love to hear that you're the same. Is it? Do you ever feel pressure to get to get quicker and to speed up your workflow?
No, I just believe when a track's done, it's done.
Right.
Although it's never done, but you have to find some sort of middle ground where you hand it over, if you know what I mean. And it's like, that's it. But it's, for me, it takes as long as it takes. You know, you can't put a time frame on something that, like, we're all artists at the end of the day, and you don't rush stuff. I think it's like molding anything or doing anything. If you're an artist, when it's done and when you think it's perfect, that's it. If it takes 2 months, then so be it.
Let's go on to some other elements of the album. First of all, what's the name of the album, and when can we expect it to drop?
The album's called Everything Changes, and it's released on the 23rd of November on Black Hole Recordings.
Very good. So yeah, so when you're approaching an album, I know when we were doing a series of singles, and then, you know, they were kind of successful, and the record company goes, right, what about the album? And you're kind of going, well, I don't know how to do an album, and I spent 3 years learning how to do a single, and then it was like, right, so you have to go and look at albums and see which albums you like. So how did you approach the album format, the whole sort of large body of work?
Yeah, I think it was around last summer. Well, I've been thinking about an album for the last couple of years. It's something I've always wanted to do, and it's purely a personal thing. It was never intended to be like some big promotional thing where I'm going to just stick 12, 13 tracks on there and just for the sake of being there. Mm-hmm. I wanted each track to be, number one, a playable track, and something that I would pour my heart into, and it would mean something to me. So I knew it was going to take some time to do that, because, like I said, I spend like a long time on working on things. So yeah, my wife was pregnant last year, my first child, so it was a bit of a workload for me this year, and I didn't realise how much it was going to affect me whenever the child was born. I needed like constant attention, and I couldn't really balance that with studio time. So yeah, I'd thought about it for a while, but the way I wanted to structure the album was, I'm a big fan of like Global Underground CDs and all those like mixed CDs and stuff like that. So I wanted it to be like essentially have a start and a finish and a flow where it would start off slow and build up. You could probably essentially mix it all together and it would sound good if you take the chill out stuff, because obviously they're way out of the BPM range. But apart from that, I wanted to structure it so it was like a
like a club night. Is that kind of, it's like a sort of, the early progressive build up, warm up, and then by your peak time stuff towards the end of the album?
Yeah.
Let's get into some of the sort of the elements of how to make it. I suppose a lot of people watching this want to know production techniques and how you do it. I mean, you're known for that uplifting trance. You borderline on trance tech, trance kind of, in Mark Sherry territory. How do you do it? What DAW do you use, and how do you get that big, full, solid sound? What's your sort of key? Was it takeaways that you can tell people about?
I think one of the best tips to get that sound that I found is, well, I use Logic 9 for a start. I'm going to make a switch to Logic X pretty much now, but I wanted to wait to finish the album because I had so many projects started in Logic 9 that didn't want to sort of interrupt everything. But one of the best tips that I can give to get everything sound right is to do all your EQing in the project. I just don't understand people that make these tracks and expect to send them to a mastering engineer and they just work magic, because at the end of the day, the majority of them is working on one file. So if you're pushing your highs and lows or mids on one thing, it's doing it on completely everything, including the kick. You can get some stem mastering done or whatever, but I'm very precise with EQing and stuff all within the project on the channel. So essentially when I finish each track, there's very, very little to be done to it.
What EQ do you use? What's your sort of go-to EQ?
I use everything, all my plugins more or less for EQing, compression, all that stuff's all Logic's own plugins. I just find like they're designed to work well with that program, so why not use them? And they work perfect for me.
No, dude, I'm the same. For years and years, people were talking to me about all these third-party plugins, and I was going, I don't know, because I just use stock plugins. I use ES1, ES2s, ES24s. I used to use Ultrabeat, and I kind of don't. But yeah, no, and with Logic X, the plugins are just getting better and better. There's a new EQ that is just incredible. The compressors, you'll love the new compressors in Logic 10. So I take it your go-to synth is probably Silent, is that correct?
Actually, it just depends on what way I want to. What I usually do is I use the ES2. It's very thin though, it has that nice brittle sound, which the toppy sound, if you want that fizz on the leads, for like the trancey stuff, or even for like the mid basses, it's always ES2. And then after that, to get the body, I'll always layer it with like a bass sound. I'll just bounce the sound out in the bass and just use it, just chop it up. I use Silent as well, but usually the best synths that I use would be Albino, believe it or not.
What do you use for your bottom end? What's your real subby low end come from?
If we're talking about sort of sub basses, or really just layers in general, do you mean?
Sub basses.
Sub basses really, I'll use probably Silent or the bass, but what I tend to do is I'll get the note that I want and I just bounce it out as audio, and I'll chop it up and I'll use that one note so it keeps that consistency. And it also means you can like EQ it. Sometimes there's a lot of phasing goes on, I'm sure you know yourself, for like mixing techniques and stuff, and sub bass can it can drop out when there's a lot of elements in there. So I find like using audio a lot better, and I'll do that with a bass change as well. You know yourself, like sometimes when a key change comes in, it'll lose a wee bit of bottom end, so you can stick plugins at like the waves or bass is pretty good. You can really boost it with that. Just really dig into it and bounce it out as audio.
Do you use a pure sine tone, or what sort of other elements do you add to get the sub bass to poke through?
What do you mean now? Just in the mix, really?
Yeah, or when you're using a sub bass, it's not a pure sine wave that you use. Would it have a little bit of like distortion on it, or is it a bit more of like a square wave, or what do you use? What sort of sound do you use?
Yeah, I'll use a pure sine wave, and then if distortion or anything else, if I want to give it a bit more bite, if you like, I'll usually use a mid bass, but then I'll pull all the sort of top on it. I'll bring it down to around 200. Do you know what I mean? Excuse me. I'll use that to sort of just blend the two of them together and mix them to get it to poke through a wee bit more. I find that's the best way, and just using the cutoff and stuff on the mids to open it up a wee bit and sort of just get everything blended and really tight, and then I'll bounce it out as audio as one note, and that'll be it.
Would you, how many layers would you have going on the bass? Are you a guy that's kind of very efficient working, or do you layer, bounce, layer, bounce, and keep getting thicker and thicker? Is that how you work?
It just depends on the track really, and how driving you want it to be. Or some tracks are more percussion based, some are more mid bass orientated. You know, if you want something that's really mid bass driving, I'll tend to maybe stick to maybe just about 2, and I'll let the delays do all the work as far as movement's concerned. Usually I set up, have my own auxiliary buses, I'll set up, I have my own delays, reverbs and stuff like that. So I'll run everything, route everything through the same delays, so it all has, all that consistency is always there. Yeah, it just really depends on the track really, you know.
And do you have a project template set up? Would you have, you know, when you open up Logic, would you have your reverbs, short, long delays, or is it complete fresh start every time?
It's always more or less fresh start, but I do have my go-to sort of like wee box of like samples and stuff that I like kicks and stuff that I like, obviously, and I have a load of channel strips saved. I usually just every year, believe it or not, I'll delete them all and sort of like start again and make new ones just to try and freshen things up again. Well, I
mean, you don't delete them permanently, do you? You probably you hive off the folder somewhere else, is that right?
Yeah, well, I try to delete most of them permanently and just sort of refresh the stuff and like just to change it up a wee bit, you know what I mean? Just to sort of, like, even if you use a different reverb, it can transform your tracks, do you know what I mean? Like different wee things. It's just sometimes your stuff can sound very samey, and I think, you know, even though it's not being lazy, it's just been more that's your sound and that's what you're accustomed to. So sometimes it's better just to mix things up a wee bit, and you know, just it sort of pushes you a wee bit too, you know.
What reverb do you use? Do you have a go-to reverb?
It's always Logic. It's stock reverb for. The only other stuff that I would use, it wouldn't be Logic, would be the wave stuff. Apart from that, it's pretty much like just effects stuff. Like I'll use the just different effects plugins for it adds. Like I like the vintage warmer. Sometimes it adds. It's good for the bass lines, for the mids and stuff. What else would I use? Yeah, it's mainly Logic's own built-in plugins. I just find the work.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and I think some people can get caught up in this whole, oh, you need all the latest plugins and stuff, and sometimes you don't, but you know, let's chat a little bit about vocals. And I know you'd done some vocal tracks prior, but how do you find the process of working with vocalists? You know, it's something, you know, when we were starting out, probably like you make instrumentals, and then suddenly to take your tracks to the next level, you have to go and get a vocalist, and that can be a kind of a daunting task. How did you find that process?
Yeah, I think it's sort of walking on eggshells really with vocalists.
You need to be careful what you say here, just in case.
Very careful here. I mean, it's I think sometimes when you're working with vocalists, if two of the artists are very passionate about what they do and they have their version of what way things should sound from a vocal point of view, and you have your way of what things should sound from a producer, or I think as a producer you always think of the long game. You're always thinking of the long game, the end result. Sometimes vocalists can't see that, if you know what I mean. They don't have that sort of vision of what way. Like if I send them something, a simple melody, they would say, is this going to be the track? But it's not, you know, it can evolve a whole lot from that. I always see the long game. So yeah, I mean,
how do you approach it? If you're sending a vocalist a track, do you just send them a backing track and go do your thing, or do you send them a melody line, or do you send them lyrics, or what's the process?
There was no real process on the album. I think it was a mixture of both of everything that you said there on the album. For example, the Be With You track with Karen Kelly, where I was sending her some stuff and she was sending me some stuff back, and we were just like, we're trying to find a middle ground of something that we liked. And I said, look, I know she comes from like a folk background, and I said, look, maybe you should just go away and have a go on the guitar and maybe do your thing and see if I get some inspiration from that. And she went away and, you know, strummed on the guitar and done a wee track, and sent me it over. I absolutely loved it. It was like head and shoulders better than any demo I was sending her, because she was doing her thing and she wasn't focusing too much on doing something else, if you know what I mean. So then I took just the instrumental of it and we turned it into a track, and that's how we done that. And Love of My Control with Christine Novelli was a wee bit of both as well. I sent her some instrumentals and she sent me some lyrics over, and then I changed it because what happened was I sent her like a piano instrumental, and then when she sent me the vocals and I wrote the backing melody, the way she was singing, the lyrics and all were good, but they just didn't fit the melody that I had, which transpired from obviously just the piano instrumental. So she had to tweak the way she sang it slightly just to fit with the melody, so it all flowed together. It was just a bit of everything really. I mean, I approach vocal tracks really with an open mind, because like you are really walking on eggshells as vocalists. So yeah, you know, I think if you meet someone that's pretty open-minded and pretty easy to work with, it can be very natural, but it can also go the other way because egos can clash, you know, but you just have to be careful really.
The Only Place is a bit of an incredible vocal. Can you tell us sort of how that came about? And I mean, listening to it over the weekend there, it's a real standout track on the album.
Yeah, I love that one. I mean, Katie has like an incredible voice, and she works with the songwriter, and they wrote the track together, and she just sent me the demo of it, and yeah, I really liked it. It's just someone that I really wanted to work with for a long time, so I said to her, you know, we up for doing something on the album, and yeah, the track turned out really well. There will hopefully be eventually, I'm going to do a club mix of that track. I think I didn't want to clutter the album up with so much stuff that there was already some club mixes on there, so yeah, they were finished already. So I think it's such a good track that it deserves something to be there and get a good release on it, you know.
So do you feel a sense of relief now that the album's done, or is it kind of like a sense of emptiness? It's sort of like, right, what do you do now? Or how do you feel now it's sort of put to bed and mastered and ready for release?
I'm very proud of it actually. I think all the tracks on the album, bar one, I mastered myself, so I'm pretty happy with the way the standard of the stuff has come out, number one, and I think each track sits really well on the album. I think it all has its place there. I couldn't have put any more effort into it as far as like time and stuff, and basically effort and quality. I think it's 100% of what I'm capable of at the minute. So there's a sense of relief that it turned out as well as I wanted it to, and I'm very proud of the way it turned out also. So I'm excited for the release, and yeah, I hope everybody by listening to it can see the effort or hear the effort that was put in.
Let's talk a little bit about DJing, sort of the big other side of your career. How do you find DJing nowadays? Is it you know, it's a very limited time slot, and you sort of get on. It's very hard to be creative in DJing. Would you agree with that?
It is and it isn't. I think the whole aspect of being a DJ now, on the production end of things, being a producer works hand in hand, because not only can you make your set stand out by doing your own exclusive material and your own mashups and bootlegs and reworks and things like that, it sort of gives you that wee exclusivity, whereas years ago in the vinyl days it was all about the tunes that you had in the white labels and things like that gave you that exclusivity. Nowadays, like, everybody has the tunes, or you know, they're released and the whole internet has them in 24 hours, you know, and that exclusivity is really gone. So I think it's important to have a group of people around you, like DJ friends that you trust, that know we're going to play your stuff and really appreciate your music, and you can send those guys like tracks and stuff, and they're going to play them and they're going to be exclusive. I think it's very important to keep it tight though, you know, among like maybe 3 or 4 DJs who are playing the stuff, and it creates a nice buzz for release and stuff. So yeah, I think as far as getting shorter DJ sets, you need to be really exclusive, and you need to have that impact straight away, and the only way you can do that is by being unique and creating your own like exclusive reworks and bootlegs, and of course playing your own material as well. Essentially you just become like any band out there that you go and pay to see a band, and you hear all their material. No one else can play that material. That's the view I have on it. Like, I play 90% of my sets are more or less my own stuff.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see the sort of state of uplifting trance, that sort of 138 end of things? Where is it today in the music industry?
I think over the last couple of years it took a bit of a battering, to be honest, and it wasn't through the fault of the quality of music or anything. I think on mainstream radio and different DJs were pushing a sort of, they were trying to like sort of fool the public with a genre of trance that wasn't trance, if you know what I mean. They were trying to push like a more cheesy end of trance, which was more commercial, and a lot of people were thinking, especially in the US market, that this was uplifting trance because that's all they were getting to hear, and that was their perception of what it sounded like. But I think now, over maybe the last couple of years, trance has seen a real resurgence, and younger guys are like myself coming through, and other up and coming producers are really still trying to push the sound and stayed true to their sound. And yeah, I think it can only be a good thing. Like, only last month there, Insomniac, one of the biggest promoters in the US, have now dedicated a festival just to trance. So that just shows you that it's really going to take off pretty soon there. Like, it is already small pockets in like New York and LA is really good, but it's just about to like explode.
No, it was always, I mean, just 10 years ago when we were touring the States, we did one of the first tours with Gatecrasher back in 99, and it was the same. There was pockets in America that New York did well, Seattle did well, LA did well, San Francisco did well, and then but in between was just nothing. So definitely, I've seen the Dream State announcements, and a lot of the big trance guys are there. So what's the future hold? What's the next sort of 12 months and beyond hold for the Sneijder camp?
I'm just really going to take a month off now. I've already had a few weeks off, and I'm playing in New York an album party, which is happening at the end of November. That's really the first week I have back after a small break. So I'm actually playing an open to close set, 6-hour set, so it's going to give me a chance to really pull out some old stuff and play some slower stuff that I really like to listen to at home. So it'll be interesting. I'll definitely be recording that one and putting that online. So yeah, have that, and then after have another album party in Finland. So basically it's just really album promotion for the really up until Christmas, and doing some album parties and whatever, and then I'll have a few singles lined up for next year. Obviously the club mix of the Katie Heath track I was talking about, and a few other things that I've just finished and just fine-tuned. So yeah, big plans for the new year. I'm hoping to push maybe my own brand and stuff a bit further, so I'll see how things go in the new year. But yeah, it's just really continue doing what I've been doing over the last sort of couple of years, and trying to push myself out of the box and push myself a bit further, really.
So definitely keep your eyes on Sneijder Music on Twitter for some big announcement, hopefully in the new year, of something really special.
Yeah,
okay.
I can't say too much yet because I don't know when, but yeah, I mean, I've big plans for some stuff in the new year. I'm just trying to finalise some stuff at the minute. So yeah, hopefully the new year to bring some new announcements for definite.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us on Sonic Academy and giving us an insight into your production world and your album. And look, we wish you all the very best of success with it, and hope it does exactly what you want it to do, and we'll definitely be looking out for you next year. I know you're very prolific in the remixing world, and you're very prolific in the DJing world, so hopefully next year we'll see a lot more from you. Sneijder, thank you very much for joining us on Sonic Academy.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It was really good. Yeah, cheers.
So guys, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed talking to Sneijder there, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye.